Okay. Okay, good evening, class. So today our class is going to be a bit short compared to what we had in the previous sessions. And as promised, what we are going to do today is we'll try to see how to create our own what we call log file to capture some sensitive data changes that we might have in our database. So we are going to start everything from scratch. So first, what we are going to do is let's start by creating a database. Then within the database, we'll try to create two tables. Actually, one table would be enough, but we'll try to create two tables. Then after creating the two tables, we'll try to insert the data into it. Then after that, we'll create one very simple trigger, where the trigger is to display a message, just to show you how a trigger operates. Then after that, we'll try to create another trigger, which is going to register important information about a change in sensitive data that we have in a database. So we will start by creating the database. So let's create a database. As you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the list of databases, Aidallah. So we have system database, database snapshots, master to end, Wendy Milno. So let's create a database called, let's call it audit envelope, or let's call it HR, an HR database envelope. So as you can see here, we have the debug and execute. So let's execute it. As you can see, it says successfully completed. So if we go back to a database and refresh it, you can see that now the HR database is already created. And if I look into the HR database, as you can see, the table, it has only system and file tables, which means there are no tables created for this database. And as you can see on the top side, on the left-hand side, the active database that I'm using currently is master2. So the next thing that we have to do is we have to switch to the current database that we want to work on. So we will say use HR. It means from now onwards, I'm going to use the HR database. Mind you, the moment we execute this code, the active database name will change from master2 to HR. Mind you, in the working canvas, you can write multiple codes, but if you select a specific code, just like I did now, mind you, if I simply execute, it will start from the first to the end. But we know that sometimes we want to execute only some part of the code that we have in the canvas. So in this case, I want to execute only use HR, which means I want the HR database to be my current database. So when I say execute, as you can see now, the active database has changed from master2 to HR. So now I have created the HR database, which is an empty database, except the system information. And now I'm using the HR, which means from now onwards, whatever data definition and data manipulation SQL statement that I execute, SQL tries to execute it within the HR database. So the first thing that we want to do is create a table. So let's create a table. Let's create a table called department. Okay, department. And let's say the department database has department ID, which is, let's say, character size of 5, and it's a primary key. Okay, so if it is a primary key, then it cannot duplicate and it cannot be null. Then let's have department name, which is character size of, let's say, 35, and it cannot be null. Okay, it cannot be empty. Then let's have tele, which is character size of 12. Again, it cannot be null, or we can simply leave it. Some departments might not have telephone. Then location, which is character size of, let's say, 30. So let's say that I want to have only these 4 attributes for the department table. So I can select this one and press execute. So as you can see, the command is successfully completed. Now, if I go to the HR database and refresh, mind you, since it's a snapshot, I have to refresh to see any update. So if I refresh, it tells me that there is a new table as a database. And if I go inside database, I mean the table, you can see that this is actually part of the log file. I mean the system catalog, or the metadata about the database that I have. So if you go to the columns, you'll see that all the columns that I have included in the create table statement is here. So you can see that the ID is character size of 5, and it's a primary key. We have department name, telephone, and location as prescribed in here. So if you go to the keys, currently I have only one primary key. As you can see, the name is given by default. I mean, given by the DBMS by default. So currently we don't have any constraints and we don't have any trigger. And as you can see, the index would automatically would be created. If you remember, we said primary keys would be indexed by default, if you remember when we discussed about physical database design. So you can see that there are many information that you can see in here. So you can go in detail about the table to see what is contained. Then let's move to the second table. Let's have more space here. Okay, so let's create the second table that we have. So create table. If you have any question, please interrupt me anytime. Okay, employee, let's have employee ID, which is character size of 5, and it's a primary key. And let's have first name, which is character size of 20, and it cannot be null. Then let's have last name, which is character size of again 20. It cannot be null. As an employee, we cannot have a null first name and last name. Salary is a float, and it cannot be null as well, because we don't have an employee without a salary. Salary. Then let's have age, which is small int. This means the amount of space taken by small int is relatively less compared to that of what we call a normal integer. So what if I want to capture the department where the employee works for? I can say WDID to mean working department ID, which is character size of 5. Mind you, since I'm talking about the department here, it has to have the same data type and size as a department ID. That's why we have character size of 5. And we can refer this as foreign key, which references from the department table, the column DID. Okay, then that's it. So this is what we are looking for. Okay, so we created another table called employee, and let's execute this one. So as you can see, the command is successfully completed. So if we refresh it here, you can see that both tables are created. Now, after these, we can select the content. So let's say select asterisk from employee, okay? And we can also do the same for the department. Select asterisk, which means everything from department. Department, okay, let's see this. Now we can select both and execute. So as you can see down here, let's widen it up a bit. So as you can see here, the first information that you see in here is for the employee, because that's the first select statement that we have, which has employee ID, first name, last name, salary, age, and working department ID. And the second one is for the department, which is the ID, department name, tele, and location. So as you can see, we don't expect anything to be displayed because the tables are empty. Now, the next thing that we're supposed to do is we can insert values into it. Now, to make our life much easier, I have already the data to be inserted. So let's copy that one to save time. So this is the first insert statement that we have. It's an insert into statement. It is one of the data manipulation languages that we have. So insert into. the department table, and the values is, mind you, we have to follow the order of the columns. So in the department table, what we have is department ID followed by name, followed by telephone and location. So as you can see, the department ID D01, finance, the telephone and the location is building 2. The second one is a budget department, and the third one is the audit department. So we can select all these 3 and execute. So as you can see, it says for each of the insert into statement, 1 row is affected, which means 1 row has been added to the table. Now, if we run the select everything from department statement, then you can see that the 3 records have been added to our database. And the same is true for an employee table. I have an already scripted insert into statement. So these are 6 employees, their data being inserted into the employee table, where we have employee ID, the first one, the first name, last name, the salary, the age, and finally, the department where that employee is working for. Mind you, I'm rushing on this one because you have already done this several times. So as you can see, I have 6 records and I have 6 messages that say 1 row is affected. So if I again run select from employee table, you can see that all the 6 employees are added to our database. This is basically what we wanted to do. Now, one of the things that we want to see is, make an update to our database. So to make an update to the database, let's focus on the employee table. So we can say update employee. Okay, so we want to update the employee table. Then I want to change the salary, for example. So change salary to be salary plus, let's say 500. Mind you, what would happen if I execute this query as it is? What would happen if I execute this statement? Anyone?
Wait. I guess it will be update the data of salary with increment to 500. So the new set of salary will become the previous salary plus 500.
For whom?
For employee.
For whom? For which
employee?
For which employee?
For the whole employee.
Exactly, for the entire employee, because we didn't put any criteria in here. But if I put criteria like where EID equal to, let's say, employee 04, if I do this, then we know that only employee 04, Almaz, is having a salary of 5,000. So we will expect the salary to be 515. So 1 row is affected. Then if I run select statement for the employee, okay, if I run select statement on the employee, then we'll see that it would be 5,500. Okay, so as you can see, for Almaz, the employee, the salary is 550. But mind you, when this change is made into your database, you have no, as a database administrator, except the log file kept by the DBMS, you have no tracking to see the change that had, taken place in your database. Like you cannot revert back from this point. You really have no piece of information, except unless and otherwise you access a log file that is maintained by the DBMS, which is a complex file format. So let's have, this is the main purpose. Now, before moving into the actual log file, let's see how a trigger will help you. Mind, if you remember, I don't know whether you have seen this during your lab session or not, we have what we call a stored procedure and trigger. Have you seen these 2 things during your lab session? አይታችሁታል? ዳኛቸው
Not yet, sir.
Stored procedure አላያችሁም?
maybe miss argue ካልሆነ እንደዛ የሚል አላየንም
okay okay እንግዲህ stored procedure and ባናይ today we are going to see a trigger but the thing is what we call a stored procedure and ወደ canvas will መለስና what we call a stored procedure in database management is what we call a stored procedure is it is a collection of command okay a collection of command you want stored and executed whenever the user wants it okay this is what we call is a stored procedure so it means it's just like a function ብላችሁ ሰሩት so it's a collection of SQL command ዝም ብሎ command ሳይሆን it's an SQL command you are going to write and store it and whenever it's required by the user you are going to execute it like for example you might have many commands that you want to run at once ለምሳሌ select statement ሰርቼ update አድርጌ okay update አድርጌ delete አድርጌ እንደገና insert የሚያደርግ command መስራት ልፈልግ ይችላል okay it's a single function ብለን እንውሰደው but what I want to do is I want to make a select from one data then update another piece of data then delete some record and finally insert it somewhere else mind you if all these commands that affect different part of your database if you want it to be executed at once then you can create a stored procedure ጽፍና I'm going to give it a name የራሱ name ይኖረዋል the stored procedure will have its own name then and create ካደረኩት በኋላ and function then after that anytime when I call the name of this stored procedure all the instructions that are included or all the commands included in that stored procedure would be executed so it's just like a function but we also have another one which we call is a trigger which we are going to see today so trigger is pretty much like a stored procedure look in the stored procedure but the nature is unlike a stored procedure which is going to be executed by the user mind you a stored procedure is executed by the user but trigger would be executed by an event okay sorry it's just like a stored procedure but the execution is triggered by an event and that event can be like an insert into one of the table or an update into one of the table ሊሆን ይችላል insert update delete you know by any of the update that might happen to your database you can trigger you know the stored procedure or the trigger to activate ስለዚህ ለምሳሌ ምን ልንል እንችላለን employee table ላይ የሆነ ነገር happens ሲያደርግ ይሄን ስራልኝ ልንል እንችላለን ማለት ነው so the main difference between a stored procedure and a trigger is a stored procedure requires the user to initiate it whereas a trigger is initiated by the event ማለት ነው okay so keep this thing in mind and let's go back to SQL so let's create a very you know trivial trigger እንፍጠር
teacher ቅርታ
okay yes
trigger የሚለው አልገባኝ ኢቨንት ማለት እንዴት ነው ማኒፑሌት የሚሆነው አሁን ያኛው በዩዘር ማኒፑሌት ይደረጋል
እንመጣበታለን
እንዴት ነው ኢቨንት
I'll come to that one I will tell you what kind of events would trigger I mean would fire a trigger okay clear ነው ያው መጀመሪያ ክሊር እንትኑን ልግለጽላችሁ ብዬ ነው okay
ጥሩ
okay any other question ከመጀመራችን በፊት አለ okay ከሌላ let's go back to here so let's create a trigger እንፍጠር so this is a command that we have okay ይታያል አይደለ ስክሪን
okay
so create trigger እንበልና let's call it እንትን እንበለው let's call it my reminder እንበለው ስሙ okay my reminder እንበለው then mind you if you want to create a trigger the trigger needs an object ምን ላይ ነው ይሄ ኢቨንት ፋየር እንዲያደርግ የምንፈልጉት ካለን let's say on the employee table ላይ no. So I want to create a trigger, which means a function that fires itself, but this function is going to fire when something happens to the employee table ላይ ነው አለ ከዛ በኋላ for እንልና this is a place where you put the eventቱን የምናስቀምጠው ይሄ ነው okay for what kind of event do you want the trigger to fire itself ማለት and the events from database perspective ምን አለ መሰለ or ምን አለ መሰላችሁ like inserting into a table is an event, updating a table is an event, deleting a record from a table is an event, creating a table is an event, altering or changing the structure of a table is an event, dropping a table is an event. Okay, even starting up a database or shutting down a database is an event. An error message that is generated by a SQL server is an event. A user logging into your system is also an event. ብዙ አይነት ኢቨንቶች አሉ. So it depends on for what kind of event that you want the trigger to fire for. So for example, for our case, I want the reminder to come for insert. Okay? For insert yun. What does it mean? This trigger is going to fire only if you have an insert into the employee table ማለት ነው. Update belows, it happens only when there is an update. Delete below, only when there is a delete ማለት ነው. Then ይሄን ካላችሁ በኋላ this is a prototype for every trigger. Create trigger, the name of the trigger, on which data element on the employee, for what kind of event, for an insert. ከዛ በኋላ ምን እላለሁ create it as such በዚህ መልክ let's say የምፈልገው print እንዲያደርግ ነው ምን print እንዲያደርግ ነው let's say I want it to print put the employee in the payroll list. አሁን it's a very simple reminder ማለት ነው okay, it's a very simple one. We'll make it a little bit complex later on. So we are creating a trigger called my reminder on the employee table whenever an insert happens, and the actual function that I want to have is something that displays a message to me ማለት like structure clear ነው በኋላ ትንሽ ኮምፕሌክስ እናደርገዋለን ብያቸዋለሁ. Is it clear?
Yeah, good.
Okay, now let's run this one. Mind you, since I'm creating it on the employee table, a change should happen on the employee table. On employee table እዚህ ጋር ላይውና trigger-ን እዩት. As you can see, the trigger folder on the employee table is an empty one. But the moment I execute this trigger, then I need to have this trigger with the name my reminder be part of a trigger under the employee table. Okay, so let's execute this one. So as you can see, the command is completed successfully. Mind you, since this is a function, there will not be any output. የሚነግረን trigger correctly create ተደርጓል ብሎ ነው. So we can refresh this one. Refresh እናደርገው ወዲያው plus sign ካሳየን it means there is something underneath ማለት ነው. ስንከፍተው ምን ይላል? Reminder የሚባል trigger ተፈጥሯል ማለት ነው. So mind you, ምንድን ነው ያልነው? This is going to happen when I insert something onto the employee table ማለት ነው. So let's have one insert statement on the employee table. እቺን እናምጣትና እዚህ ጋር trigger ከተፈጠረ በኋላ insert እናደርግ. So let's say this is employee 6. Okay, message ስለሆነ message folder እንትን ላይ ነው tab ላይ ነው የምናገኘው. So let's call it employee 7 and let's have መኮንን አየለ. The salary is 12,000, the age is 30, and he works for department 3 ማለት ነው. Now mind you, this is an insert statement on the employee table, so it aligns exactly with what the trigger does ማለት ነው. ስለዚህ ቺን run እናደርጋት. The moment ይሄን run ስናደርግ two things would happen. The first thing is an insert into the employee table would be done. The second one, since it's an insert on the employee table, the trigger would fire. ምክንያቱም employee ላይ insert happens ሲያደርግ ይሄንን ስራ ብለን document አድርገናል ማለት ነው. So the moment I insert the table, these two things should happen ማለት ነው. እንምረጠውና run እናድርገው. So as you can see ምን አለ? one row is affected ይልና ግን ሜሴጁ ምን መጣ put the employee into the payroll list ብሎ ዲስፕሌይ ያደረገ ማለት ነው okay so trigger ማለት እንደዚህ ነው ባህሪ when something happens now let's do an insert on the department table sorry let's do an insert into the department table አራተኛ department ልጨምር as you can see department table like we don't have any trigger ላይ ስንመጣ there is nothing so we don't expect such kind of a message to be displayed ማለት ነው ዝም ብለን department 4 እንበለውና let's say the department is logistics እንበለው telephone the same ይሁን buildingum okay building 1 ላይ ይሁን እንበለና let's run this one okay so as you can see one row is affected ብሎ ብቻ ነው የሚያቆመው ማለት ነው nothing would happen because the trigger is not connected to the department rather it is connected to the employee table not only that if you update the employee table nothing would happen as well ምክንያቱም the trigger is only for insert so if you say update employee okay then if you say set salary equal to salary plus 100 sorry plus 100 where id equal to e02 ነው አይደለም የሚለው ያለ yeah e02 ብንል this is an update statement so one row is affected but there is no message because again even though the query is on the employee table the trigger is not on the update rather it is on insert ስለሆነ እቺኛውን update ብንላት ኖሮ at this time the message would have been displayed ማለት ነው so this is the whole concept that we have on a trigger clear now is it clear
yes
okay good yes. Now let's go to the actual task which is an audit log ነው መፍጠር የምንፈልገው so to give you the scenario what I want to do is from the employee table I consider salary to be a sensitive data አይደለ ካሉት ዴታዎች በሙሉ so I want to see if the salary is updated by an employee updated no way የሚለውን ማየት ፈልጋለሁ and whenever it is updated I want to capture the new and the old value በፊት የነበረውና አሁን አዲስ የገባውን ዴታ separately ከኤምፕሎይ ቴብል ውጪ ማስቀመጥ ፈልጋለሁ so before doing diving into that let me show you some basic important codes that that would be important mind you ለዚህ purpose ምን ፈልጋለሁ I want to capture the user who made the update I want to capture the date the month and the year where the update is made and I want to also look into the computer name from which the update is made okay እነዚህን ማድረግ ፈልጋለሁ so I will give you the code for each of this ለምሳሌ if you simply say select user ብትሉት a select statement with user it tells you that the current user is DBO ነው okay database owner ነው DBO ነው currently ያለ okay so mind you if it was any other user the name of the user would pop up in here ማለት ነው login ያደረገው and if you say select let's say get date እንበለው select get date below get date is a function that gives you the system date run ብታረጉት it gives you the year the month the date the hour the minute the second and the millisecond ይሰጠኛል ማለት ነው and from this one you can also extract specific ones ለምሳሌ እዚህ ላይ መጥቼ if I say select ብዬ year and get date okay ከget date ላይ sorry እዚህ ጋር get part ነው የሚሆነው get part okay get sorry date part ማለት ነው date part which means take the part of the date ማለት ነው and I want to take the year okay year ነው መውሰድ የምፈልገው ካልኩኝ በኋላ then I will say እቺኛዋን አልፈልጋትም then as year ልል ይችላል ምን ማለት ነው ከget date ላይ mind you get date it has the year the month the day the hour the minute the second እና the millisecond ድረስ አለ but I want to take only the year ካልኩኝ I want to see only the year ካልኩኝ I'm going to execute this one so as you can see it gives me only the year part ስለዚህ date part ካልኩ በኋላ from get date give me the year ማለት ነው what if I want to take only the hours ስለዚህ HH ለዋለው take only the hour ማለት ነው from the date take only the hour ማለት ነው so it's going to say 19 ይላል አንድ ሰዓት ማለት ነው if I say take only the minute ብቻ ወሰድልኝ ብለው the same thing sorry minute mi ነው give me only the minute this is just to let you know that there are inbuilt functions ስለዚህ ሚኒቱ 11 ነው አንድ ሰዓት ከ11 ማለት ነው ሰዓት so this is one important thing the other one is by the way you can simply say get date ምክንያቱም ስትፈልጉ ቀኑንም ወሩንም ሰዓቱንም ስለምንፈልግ እንደዚህ ማድረግ እንችላለን as date ልንል እንችላለን so get date as date ስንለው ዴቱ 220427 በዚህ ሰዓት ነው ይለናል ማለት ነው then to take the current computer you can also say select host name ልንለው እንችላለን host name is it captures the name of the computer which is being used ማለት ነው in this case when we show Lenovo ማለት this is the name of my computer so these are important components that I want to take into ስለዚህ ምንን እንይዛለን the user the date and time and the computer ከዛ በተጨማሪ ግን I want to take the old and new data እሱን በኋላ አሳያችኋለሁ how to do that now let's go to once we have this one let's go to our database now what we want to do is this information I want it to be captured into a separate table and separate table ላይ እንዲቀመጥ ነው የምፈልገው so what I'm going to do is create table I'm going to create a table called my audit log okay let's create a table called my audit log and it has these attributes ምን እንበለው user እንበለው or active user okay active user እንበለው active user እንበለውና its character size of let's say 30 ትልቅ ሊሆን ስለሚችል so let's have change date እንበለው to mean that the date where the change happened ስለዚህ ዝም ብለን date time እንበለው okay the date and time then the workstation okay the workstation where the change has happened since it's a string let's say character size of 13 value then let's have the data element ምንድነው የተቀየረው የሚለውን ለማወቅ ስፈልግ so it's character size of 30 again okay so let's have the old value okay okay the old value so we can say it is float ልንል እንችላለን okay sorry it's not it's a comma then the new value and again it's float okay ስለዚህ እነዚህን እንያዛቸው so as you can see my log file contains the active user the date where the change has happened the computer where the user has used to make the change the data element that's affected the old and the new value ብለን ማለት ነው so let's run this statement so a command is completed successfully so we can go to the table refresh it and as you can see a table called my audit log is already created with all the attributes that we have put in here ሁሉም attributes አሉ now once we have done that if you run a select statement since it's a new table there will be nothing so select everything from my audit log so it's an empty table it's an empty table so as you can see the columns the schema is here but it has no content now what we are going to do is let's create the trigger okay now the trigger as I said is when there is an update ለኢንሰርት አይደለም የምፈልገው so let's call it create trigger okay let's call it trigger create trigger and let's call it capture salary change envelope because this is a sensitive data that I have so I want to capture a change in the salary and this should happen on the employee table okay and this should happen for update update ሲደረግ ብቻ ይሁን ነው የምንለው then as እንልና ከዚህ በኋላ I have to put the code ማለት now as we have said earlier we want to capture the old the new, the date, መያዝ እንፈልጋለን. So let's have it in such a way. The first thing that we have to do is we have to declare. ምክንያቱም አዳዲስ ቫሪያብሎች መያዛችን አይቀርም. Mainly, we are going to capture the old and the new data. So in SQL, declaration is done just like any other programming language, which it has to be, it has to have a prefix, the @ sign. Then automatically SQL will know that this is not a name of an attribute or a column rather than a variable. ስለዚህ ምን እንበለው new ብለን float እንያዝ. Okay, then let's have old, then let's have it as a float again. Okay, let's have a comma in here for each of this. Then let's have at time እንበለው እና this is date time እንበል. Okay, so now I have declared 3 variables ማለት ነው. Now, after that, this is where I want you to focus. Okay, this is where I want you to focus. So the first thing that I'm going to do is a select statement. And whenever there is an update on your table, there are 2 temporary tables to be created. DBMS SQL Server, ሁለት temporary table. Can you hear me? It was disconnected. Are you with me? Can you hear
sure,
me?
but of course we did not just hear you after declare.
Yeah, interrupt ሆኗል declare እንትን አላለም።
በቃ አይዛው ላይ ነኝ ያለሁት. I had to switch my connection. So after declaring, what I was saying is in Microsoft SQL there are 2 temporary tables that would be created. One is called inserted and the other one is called deleted. Okay, these are temporary tables to be created by SQL whenever you insert, delete, or update. Okay, whenever you want to do either of these 2, I mean either of these 3, if you insert a new data, then inserted table would be created. After the insertion is done, that table would be dropped. Table no የሚፈጠረው with the same format as the original table. Whenever you want to delete a record from your table, this temporary table would be created, the table called deleted. Then after the deletion is done, this temporary table would be dropped. And whenever you do an update, both inserted and deleted tables would be created temporarily, mind you, temporarily by the DBMS. Insert, delete, ወይንም update ሳናረግ እነዚህን ቴብሎች አክሰስ እናርግ ብንል it's not going to work out. ለምሳሌ ዝም ብዬ አንድ ኤግዛምፕል እዚህ ጋር ልስጣችሁና if you say select everything from inserted ብላችሁ ራን ለማድረግ ብትሞክሩ, okay, if you do this for instance ራን ብታረጉ ምን ይላል? there is no object called inserted ይላል። ለምንድን ነው? because inserted table is something that would be created temporarily whenever you want you perform an insert statement ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ምን እናደርጋለን ከዚህ በኋላ let's have this one select እንበለውና now I want to capture the new data given by the user. ስለዚህ ምን እላለሁ? at new እላለሁ። at new ምን ይሆናል? it would be the salary. from where? from the inserted. ምክንያቱም inserted ማለት is going to capture the new data that is received. Then I will say again select at old ደግሞ ምን ይሆናል? it's going to be the salary column. Okay, the salary column from deleted, because the older data is the one that is removed and the removed one would be temporarily captured in the deleted table and the new one would be captured on the inserted table. These 2 tables are the one that are temporary ያልኳችሁ እነዚህ። Okay, then at the same time I'll say ቅድም የተጠቀምንበትን select ልና at time I'll say this equal to get date. Okay, I want to get the date. Then mind you, what we call an update is if the old is different from the new. So what we are going to say is if the old is different from, sorry, at old ነው ማለት ያለብን, is different from at new ካልሆነ ለውጥ የለማ አይደለ? This happens only if the old is different from the new. Then I'm going to start executing a transaction. Begin እልና, okay? Begin እልና insert into, okay, insert into አረጋለሁ. I'm going to insert into my audit. This is a new table. Value ስልና then I'm going to start putting the data. የመጀመሪያው ዴታችን ማን ነው የሚሆነው? I want to capture the user. ዩዘሩን ይዛለሁ መጀመሪያ ላይ then I'm going to put at ከዩዘር በኋላ ያለን ማን ነው? date ነው። ስለዚህ I'm going to put at time አስቀምጣለሁ። ከat time በኋላ ምንድነው የምንፈልገው ከዛ በኋላ? the data element ኤሌመንታችን ማን ነው? the data element is the salary አይደል? salary ላይ ስለሆነ update ያለው so I'll say salary ነው the data that's updated. Then the next column is old value and new value. So I'm going to say at old, comma, at new. Okay? At new አደርጋለሁ ማለት ነው በቃ። So it means the moment this happens, these values are going to be inserted into the audit log table ማለት ነው። ቀጥሎ enter እናደርግና ወደ ኋላ ተመልሰን this transaction would end. Mind you, more መጨመር እችላለሁ ማለት ነው ከአንድ በላይ transaction. So this is a trigger that we created ማለት ነው. This is a trigger that we have created. As you can see, the purpose of the trigger is to make sure that this new and old data is inserted into our log file ማለት ነው. So pay attention. We said create a trigger, capture salary change on the employee table whenever there is an update. ከዛ declare አደረግን ሶስት variables to capture the new data, the old data, and the date and the time. Then during an update, the new data would be captured temporarily on the inserted table, and the old data would be captured on the table called deleted. Then the date, the current date would be captured from the system, and whenever the old and the new data is different, I will execute this transaction ማለት ነው. And that transaction is insert into the system log. Mind you, pay attention that the system log, if we run it in here, it's an empty table. Now let's run this trigger. Run እናድርገው። ምንድነው የሚለው? The column name does not match. ምን አጎደልን? Let's see it. So we have user, we have time. Oh, workstation ይቀረናል. Sorry. አያችሁ እዚህ ጋር we forgot the workstation. ስለዚህ ከምን በኋላ ነው workstation ያለው? ከታይም በኋላ አይደል? So እዚህ ጋር እንመጣና ማንን ነው capture ልናደርግ የፈለግነው? We want to capture the host አይደለ? So we'll say here host name, the name of the computer ማለት ነው. Okay, so let's run it again. Let's run the stored the trigger run እናድርገው. So as you can see, it says completely, successfully completed. So let's go to the tables. Let's go to the audit ላይ ይሄ ነው ያለን. Okay, very good. And the trigger happened on the employee table. So let's go to the employee table. Trigger ላይ ብንሄድ, as you can see, we have two triggers. One is a reminder, and the other one is the current audit table. The trigger that captures the data on the audit table ማለት ነው በቃ. The job is done. Now what we are going to do is let's make an update. Update እናድርግ. Okay? So update, mind you, we know that the audit table, my audit log table is empty. Now let's make an update on the employee table. So let's say update employee, then set salary equal to salary plus 500, where employee ID equal to E07 አይደለ ያለን? የመጨረሻው ማን ነበር? E07 አይደለ? ስለዚህ 1200 ነው ያለው። ስንት እንጨምርለት ነው ያለው? 2000 እንጨምርለት, which means 1200 የነበረው 1400 ይሆናል ማለት ነው አይደለ? So this is what we want to do. Mind you, now employee table ላይ now three things would happen.
salary ላይ ነው የጨመርነው ዶክተር፣ salary ላይ ነው የጨመርነው።
yes አሁን እንትኑ እኮ የሚለው ይሄንን ነው። ትሪገሩ የሚለው አፕዴት ሲደረግ ነው የሚለው employee table። ስለዚህ ሳላሪውን ስንጨምር we want to capture the new and the old salary ማለት ነው። ከዚህ ወደዚህ ተቀይሯል የሚለው እንዲይዝልን ማለት ነው።
Okay.
ስለዚህ ቺን ራን እናደርጋት አሁን ሶስት ነገር happen ያደርጋል one the update will be done second the reminder would fire no reminder fire አያደርግም insert ላይ ስላለ አይደለ insert ላይ ስለሆነ fire አያደርግም capture salary change የሚለው trigger ግን fire ያደርጋል which means that would insert a new value into the audit log table ስለዚህ execute እናደርገው ምን አለ አያችሁ እዚህ ታች ሜሴጁን it says one row is affected አለ ሌላም one row is affected አለ mind you the first one is the change that happened on the employee table and the second one is a change that's happened on the log file አሁን ምን እናደርግ እዚህ ጋር እንምጣና select everything from employee እንበለው okay then employee table ላይ we'll see that the seventh employee would be having an additional 2000 200 ነበር 400 ሆነ now let's do the same thing select everything from my audit log ለዛ ነው አይደለም የሚለው my audit log yes not to create a spelling mistake let's take it as it is mind you እስካሁን ባዶ ነበር ይሄ ስለዚህ my audit logን select ብናደርገው what would happen so as you can see one record has been added እዩት ምን ይላል the active user was DBO the change has been done on this time the workstation is when it's shown Lenovo the data element is salary the old value was 12,000 and the new value is 4,000 ብሎ ካፕቸር ያደርጋል ማለት ነው ስለዚህ ማ መቼ ሳለሪውን ከምን ወደ ምን እንደቀየረው አያለው so if there is any mistake then I can actually review it from the log file ለምሳሌ እንደዚህ ባረጋው ምንም ይሆን ይመስላችኋል if I run this statement
ኦዲት ሎግ ላይ የሁሉም ኢንክሪዝ ሆኖ ይመጣል
የሁሉም ለየብቻው ነው የሚገባው ማይንድ ዩ አሁን 7 ሰራተኞች አሉኝ አይደል የሰባቱም ሳለሪ አፕዴት ይሆንና የሰባቱም ቼንጅ ደግሞ ሎግ ፋይል ላይ ራን ይገባል ማለት ነው እቺን ኤግዜኪዩት እናርጋትና አያችሁ ቼንጁ ከዛ እንትን ላይ ሎግ ፋይል ላይ ሄደን እንየው ኖ ይሄ ሶሪ የሎግ ፋይሉ ላይ የሚይዘው የመጨረሻዋን ነው የሚይዘው አይደለ ራን እናርጋት ሁሉንም ይሰራል የመጨረሻውን ነው ካፕቸር ያደረገው ሶሪ so
7 rows is affected ይላል ግን እኮ ሰባቱን
ይሄኛው የኤምፕሎዩ ነው 7 rows affected
okay
የኤምፕሎዩ ነው 7 የሚለው የሎግ ፋይሉ የመጨረሻዋን ነው ካፕቸር ያደረገው
okay
so pretty much this is what we wanted to look into እዚህ ላይ ፎከስ ሰተን የምናየው እነዚህ ነው ማለት ነው በዋነኝነት the inserted and the deleted so in a way you can create a very simplistic log file to track what has been done on your database without the users being aware of it ማለት ነው okay so this is what I have for you for today I hope it's useful right
yeah በጣም ቆንጆ ትምህርት ነበር
so I'll share with you the video in case if you want to see it you know several times and if you want to try it out okay thank you very much maybe about a stored procedure I think I had another video about a stored procedure maybe I would upload that on our Telegram group for you to look into it I thought you already have seen that in your lab session but we know that a stored procedure is you know relatively less complex than a trigger okay thank you very much and it was good to have you all in this session because this is voluntary thank you very much
እኛም ከልብ